There it goes. Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to another Bite session hosted by Hacker Refactor. Today we are, thank you. Today we are learning about professionalism in the workplace with Kameron, and I will let him take it away.
Hopefully my voice gets recorded here.
Yeah.
Okay.
I can hear it on Nikki's computer.
All right. I'll try and hover close by to the microphone. Well, hello. As you all know who I am, I'm Kameron. Well, I haven't met you. What's your name?
I'm Daniel.
Daniel. Good, great to meet you. So I've had kind of you know how sometimes, I don't know if you've ever heard like an anecdote, oh, careers aren't linear. It's like, okay. After a while, you're like, I get it. But then I look at my own career, I'm like, oh. It looks kind of crazy when I mind mapped it all out. So I graduated high school 2011. Very nice. Dove into work and school and didn't stop working until very recently, now that I'm full-time student. So I've had an opportunity, I would say, to learn from some very smart people in a variety of careers, a variety of fields. So yes. Oh, well, let's fix that. Better? Okay, thank you. Okay, so I want to talk about three things and hopefully not go too crazy into this wide variety of tips that I have picked up on, but getting the job, crushing it at the job, and then leaving the job. So let's start off with where it all began. My parents owned, I should say, a janitorial and carpet cleaning business. So as a young Kameron, I was cleaning commercial buildings with my parents. Every kid's dream. I've cleaned way more toilets than I would have liked to. But so that's kind of where my career began, was just scrubbing things. I ended up cleaning this guy's airplane. Yeah, that must be an after picture. I did that for just a little while, kind of as a summer job. And then this is after graduating high school, I got a job as a shop hand in an airplane manufacturing place. So I also did some administrative stuff. This was a really awesome job because I did a huge variety of things. I scrubbed toilets again, and I made carbon fiber parts, which is what's going on there. And that's not a picture of me, unfortunately. And I drove a really worn down forklift. I took trash to the dump. I made things out of aluminum. Pretty cool job for learning just a whole bunch of hands-on skills and kind of getting thrown at a whole bunch of things. While working there, I was in school for aviation, got my helicopter pilot certificate, and learned to fly in these small helicopter that is underneath this very big helicopter. And so then following my certification, I worked as a flight instructor, teaching to fly in those things. From there, I jumped to a tour pilot job, flew helicopters in the Grand Canyon, as well as Las Vegas. That is a picture I took, unlike the rest of these so far. And so I lived in Las Vegas for about a year and did that. I ended up leaving my pilot job, somehow ended up working as a graphic designer for a sign making company. I had started there just part-time. Their graphic designer quit. They're like, we'll train you. And suddenly I'm making real estate signs like crazy. And I left that job because I got an offer to be assistant operations manager at the place I had worked before. But they had pivoted kind of in what they were doing. They were always building airplanes, but now in a much more of a production fashion instead of a hobbyist, I guess, kind of fashion. This was probably like one of the biggest stretches in my career. It was a very difficult job, really interesting experience. From there, I went to a flooring company. I worked as an executive assistant. I basically tracked orders for hundreds of homes a year that we were doing flooring for. And then most recently became a full-time student. So now, like, just a little context of like, I've ended up in all these different fields. So let's see. Okay, let's talk about getting a job. Aviation is a super competitive environment, especially for pilots. I learned a lot from that about how to get a job. So Zoom, let's get rid of this. Okay. So everyone talks about networking a ton. I don't think it really clicked in what networking means until I kind of found myself networking a little more organically, less of just this big word network. I think of networking as forming allies. And the important thing with networking is how you do it. The people who have been most successful that I've known at networking are super giving. They'll help you get a job. They'll help you with something you're stuck on, give you information, and maybe like buy you a drink sometimes. Like, they're very outgoing, but they're never like, what can you bring me? What can you do for me? And that's what I mean by allies. Like, if you can build those connections where you are like, you both have this understanding that you help each other out, those are going to be the strongest connections in your network, and the people you can kind of rely on. Say you need a little, you need help. Maybe you want to get your foot in the door somewhere. So network is really huge. Most of the jobs I've had are through people I've known. And I think that ends up being the case for a lot of people. Super important to also get face time with hiring managers. It's a little different, I would say, than networking, although maybe it's under that umbrella. The reason is because you need to differentiate your resume from everybody else's. And a face and a handshake is a far more effective way to do that. I would recommend, especially if you're like driving towards a dream job, a company you really want, if you can, keep cash on hand for plane tickets. It's kind of a crazy, but if it's, I'm talking about an out of town job, especially like if you're in Bend and you want to work for a software company in Florida, like you should plan on flying to Florida to go to the company, to meet people there. You definitely, this is where your network can come in handy too, because if you know people at the company, it's going to be far more easy to get an introduction. If you don't have like any way to find out who, like, there's not really an excuse. You should scour LinkedIn. Like, you should basically make it your goal to meet somebody at that company who can get you that handshake with a hiring manager. And it might be, as crazy as it might be a plane ticket for like an hour meeting, but that might swing the needle in your favor or get you an interview. Otherwise, you can go to events that employees will be attending, ask for a tour, some way of trying to just like, if you keep showing up, they'll get to know you and that'll help a lot. So this step is to get an interview. You got to do that to get an interview. Maybe not, everywhere's different, but you're gonna have better chances. When you get to the interview, you really like be prepared for that interview. In piloting, you're gonna be, I was asked technical questions, scenario-based questions. I didn't end up having flight interviews, but there were flight interviews as well. Software is kind of similar. There's lots of technical interviews and a whole process there. The best thing is just be prepared. And that's not to say like if you bomb an interview, as it's been said, I'm sure from people who've done interview talks, it's okay. Like just keep at it. It's not the end of the world, but the more you can be prepared and practice, the better off. Side note, that question, what are your weaknesses? For me, I always struggled that for the longest time because for whatever reason, I always like went to my character weaknesses or like my Kameron weaknesses, my trick is just look at the job description. What's something in that job description you've never done? There you go. It's a weakness because you don't know how to do it. But always follow up with like, okay, I've never used this tool you have, but I've been watching YouTube videos on it. I've been practicing a little on my side projects to show like I've got weaknesses, but I also address them and give attention to them. By the way, your network can help with that interview too. Some companies have standardized questions and they ask everybody. It's more of like a HR fairness policy. If you know someone that works there, they can just, I've had people send me a list of questions they were asked and I was asked the same question. So that was pretty cool. Helped my interview a lot. Okay, so once you land the job, you got to crush it at that job. And piloting taught me things. My time as a management taught me things. So a little bit on that. So let's talk about a little story. In Las Vegas, we would fly back. We would have a flight that would leave the Grand Canyon timed so that on the flight back, the passengers could see the sunset. Super awesome experience. I wear glasses and I don't wear contacts normally. I have a pair of prescription sunglasses and I have a pair of, regular glasses for when it's not sunny out. So in the helicopter I was flying, there's a baggage compartment. My normal habit, because I'd be flying most of the day, is my last flight of the day, I would put my clear glasses in on my shirt or in my pocket while I had my sunglasses in until the sun went down and I'd swap them out. Well, one particular day, I left my clear sunglasses in the cargo of the helicopter and all I had was sunglasses. And the sunset, we're following helicopters about a half mile and now all I have is sunglasses on. If I take them off, everything's blurry. So suddenly I'm in a situation where I'm having to decide if I'm flying visually impaired. Am I gonna fly with sunglasses and not be able to make out features as much, or am I gonna fly blurry and where I can see lights easier, but not a lot else? I think I ended up just doing kind of like a mix where I was like flipping back and forth. Super stressful situation. Landed fine, but piloting, a lot of times there's a debrief, especially more mission-based flights. I was doing, at the time, those were tours. There wasn't a lot of debrief, but flight instructing every flight ended with, how'd the flight go? What can we do to improve? I find this model super effective for pretty much life in general, but career also. Like a debrief following a completion of something. So a project, maybe it's an assignment in school, like how did it go? What can we improve on? What do we never want to do again? chances are you'll have a chance to iterate. You have another assignment, you have another week, you have another opportunity, and then that leads to improvement. So for me, that meant my flight bag, which I kept my glasses in, now lived next to my seat in the cockpit so that if I happened to forget, I could reach down, grab my glasses, and never freak myself out again by not being able to see. Okay. Another interesting part of piloting that directly applies, I feel, is workload management. So this is a pretty common graph in the world of aviation. You have a margin of safety, you have a workload related to tasks, and ideally that margin of safety is huge. That gives you lots of room for error. Certain phases of flight have very high task load, which means your margin is really slow, which leads to this solution: prepare for high workloads during periods of low workloads. So that means out here, like in cruise flight, I'm preparing for where I'm going to land, what radio frequencies I need, any communications, any navigation steps that I can handle earlier, I am. So in a business setting, think of like, I have a slow week at school, but next week it's going to be super heavy. Well, that's not a business setting, that's a school setting. But at work, it's the same. Slow week at work this week, but I know next week is going to be busy. There's events, there's presentations, whatever it may be. And that in piloting, you're risking safety. In business, you may be risking career or maybe your reputation. Maybe it's smaller than that, just like, oh shoot, like I'm late, I'm behind, I'm disorganized. If you can keep that kind of margin built in and even things out, it's going to be better off. Other thing I've learned in flying, there was a pace to flight that I always tried, and I didn't come up with this. I'm not sure who originally did, but no hurry, no pause. That'd be the first time I heard of this was somebody who was biking really hard, and they realized if they just like slowed down a bit, basically their time to do like a loop did not change that much, but their energy levels did. So in flying, it was more like super expensive to operate helicopters, also trying to keep a schedule, trying to keep a pace going so that I can get the work done that I needed to. It's not really any different. Think of writing code. Like if you can find a pace where you can work steadily, you're going to prevent burnout. You're going to do better quality of work. It's that saying, go slow to go fast. Super helpful. Okay. Also think of when you're working, think long-term. And what I mean is, if you sprint and hustle nonstop, you'll also get burnt out. And I think if I had to do this pace for 5 years or 10 years, is that sustainable? Do I have an end? Am I hustling this for a short time, or am I going to, like, in order to keep up with how I think this job is going to go, am I going to have to remain at that pace that whole time? Last thing, question the system and communicate. What I mean there is sometimes businesses don't have good systems set up. Sometimes managers have unrealistic expectations of what one person can get done in a workday. So it's worth evaluating, what work you're doing. Is it realistic? And if it's not, communicate that. Offer improvements to the system. Offer ways that the workload can be shifted. That makes it more realistic. Okay. Other thing in aviation is planning for an alternate. One flight in particular, I was actually returning from the Grand Canyon again. Forecast had shown thunderstorms were supposed to be popping up around the time I was getting back. So I did a little bit of work, not as much as I should have. But I did get frequencies, plan for going to a different airport. It turned out I'm a couple miles away from the airport. Air traffic control lets me know they have had lightning strikes on the airport, so I'm not landing there anymore. They actually, what's funny is they don't tell you, like, they will not tell you what to do, in the sense of the final decision of what I do with my aircraft was my decision. So they say, hey, there's lightning strikes on the airport, say intention. Like, what would you like to do? I could have said, I'm going to land. And they would have said, all right. But that's not what I did, though. I went to a different airport, 6 people on board, just on a tour. And that's as far as I went with thinking through my backup plan. I land at this airport, not like the airlines where there's a whole support staff. It was just me and these 6 people. And I'm like, well, we're going to wait out this thunderstorm and then we'll fly back. I was in Las Vegas at the time. Had I thought through it a little more clearly, I would have offered what many of my passengers did. I think 4 out of my 6 just took an Uber and left. And these 2 ladies were like, no, we're waiting. And so they got a extra 10-minute flight out of the deal. But so main thing here, though, is stuff happens, stuff comes up, things don't go according to plan. The best thing, in my opinion, is in a career setting, in an office setting, state what the problem is to your boss, your coworkers, whoever you need to. Tell them what the impacts of that are going to be. Like this software, we have an issue in our development process. We didn't foresee this. This means we need this much more time to finish. Here's the solutions. Like either we push the delivery date out, or we work overtime, or whatever the case may be. But bring this, like something breaks, something goes wrong, bring the solutions and offer those. Your boss may say, oh, I have a different idea, and that's what you end up doing, but it's going to look a lot better on you when you bring those problems up. All right. A little bit of a side note here, just on becoming indispensable. Businesses exist to make money. That's the reality of it. Some are really bad about that, where they think they can drag you through the dirt to make money. Others are actually super respectful of you, but they still have to make money. So if you can increase the company's bottom line, it's going to do a lot for your career. If you're a dead weight in the company, that's not going to be so great. Your managers will notice. And so how can you fill needs? How can you bring value to the company? Maintain your boundaries. If they, don't give them, it's always better for the company if you're willing to work yourself into the ground. You know, if they're going to make money off of you. So you got to maintain your boundaries. This is it's not originally from Cal Newport, but he writes a lot about work. And this is something he talks about a lot. Become so good they can't ignore you. Kind of a good motto. Another thing on becoming indispensable. Oh, already 5:25. Okay. Ban this word, this phrase, I'm waiting for so-and-so. I'm waiting for this paperwork. Sometimes that's legitimate. Sometimes it's an excuse. So for an example, if you emailed somebody in your own company and you needed some information, maybe you could have called them and gotten it in 30 seconds and your workflow continues, but because you emailed them, now you are waiting for them to get back to you and they didn't check their email for the last 2 days. So work that you could have had done is just sitting for no reason. Ultimately that costs the company, ultimately it slows you down. Good idea to just not use that word. Also make notes of your accomplishments. If you raise profits for a company, if you help them succeed, keep notes of those and when and metrics, because if you need a raise or if you have another interview, those are going to be super helpful things to bring up. Okay. So aviation taught me a lot, but also my time in management taught me a lot. So 2 questions here. First, who are your stakeholders? So the stakeholder is basically anybody with an interest in what you're doing. Could be the owner of the company. It could be the other departments you interact with. Basically, you need to know who depends on you and how what you do affects people around you. Like if OSU decided to put a bathroom in this corner of this room, a stakeholder to that would be the janitors. They would need to know there's a new bathroom. If no one tells them, they're not going to clean it. It's happens like crazy though, from my experience. People just do something in a silo, make a decision, don't include people who it affects, expects them to do something about it. They have no idea. And the system just starts like crumbling in on itself. Also with this, don't punt your issues. This would be like, oh, we put in the bathroom in the collab and like, I'm gonna just hope that somebody else tells the janitorial group. It normally just doesn't end up happening. Things just get left behind. Related, who are your customers? So you need to know, this is interesting because your customer is always ultimately the person who pays your company or pays you money. However, let's say you are writing code, the person directly downstream from you is your direct customer from a kind of theoretical standpoint. How you package what you make and ship down to them is shows your quality of work. So if they just have to hunt you down for details and ask you tons of questions that could have been presented to them, that's going to be super frustrating for people to work with you and be around you. So think of who your customers are. Normally there's a lot more than you would expect because also anybody downstream. So quality assurance would be one customer, but also who's after them. And then ultimately the real customer paying money will feel the effects of poor quality. All right. This I stole from everyone's favorite Jeff Bezos. One-way and two-way doors. So this is how, when you're presented with a decision-making problem, this is a model for thinking through it. One-way doors are decisions that are nearly impossible to reverse. So that could be quitting your job, could be deleting the database that you don't have a backup of, anything of that sort where there's really serious consequences to. Two-way doors, however, are easy to reverse. So that would be trying a new feature. Basically, you could think of it like experimenting. And the value in this is even as an employee without decision-making abilities that affect maybe the broader company, you can still test things in your own realm of control and see what happens. But best not to check things that are going to have serious effects without more buy-in, maybe from your managers or your bosses. Okay. Similar to punting, there's this issue of follow-through. I've seen it so many times that people just don't finish. Like they take a task 90% of the way and then they stop. Maybe they got distracted, never pick it back up again. And those issues always come back to haunt you. It's super easy to just say like, I'm pretty much done. And then you get distracted and time goes on. But if you finish, then you can set it down and maybe not even have to touch it again. If you don't, you're going to have to come back to it, refigure out what you're doing. It's kind of like writing code when you come back and reread your code and you're like, I have no idea what this is supposed to do. Okay. All right, I've just got a few more things. Are we good? What?
Yeah.
Okay.
go for it.
All right. So another thing that can help you excel in your career is having an open line of communication with your boss. So here's a few things. If your boss is good, he's probably not micromanaging. He or she is probably not micromanaging. There is probably a direction that has been given to you and not a lot of steps for how to achieve that. So the best thing you can do in that case when you have more freedom is communicate your plan to your boss so that they know where you're at. They don't have to ask. It's essentially just a proactive step instead of them having to come to you and saying, I don't know what you're doing. Why is this taking so long? I don't know when you're going to be done. Tell me all this information. You can ask your boss, what would you like to see more of and what would you like to see less of as far as your own performance, your own work, what you're producing. You can also ask your boss what keeps you up at night. Good question to see, like, what are stressing them out about the workplace. Basically, this is about becoming a really big supporter of your boss, making their job easier. Managing is hard, and there's a huge burden put on management normally from whoever owns the company that teams produce what they're supposed to. Another thing is ban, I don't know, and obviously not strictly meaning never say that again, but if your boss asks you a question and you just say, I don't know, sometimes that's okay. But for the most part, it's better to have, here's the plan, like, or I don't know, but I will find you the answer later today. I'm going to go look it up right now. Something that doesn't just leave it like a problem in the air that you're not really taking on. They're asking you for a reason. They want to know information so that they can do their jobs. Okay. Related to that is just communicate with details. The more specific you, okay, there's this aspect of you need to give like a, depending on who's asking what, you can give a high level answer like, we're behind, we will have it to you by Friday. If they ask for details, have details. But basically, pretty much everywhere I've worked, people care about when work is going to get done. And it's best if you can have those details or have costs or like, how's it going? How's the project going? Hey, we're on track to finish by Friday. It's going to be a lot better answer than it's going good. A lot of times the people who are coordinating and directing are eventually interfacing with the customer, and the customer always wants to know on budget and on schedule. Oh yeah, and there's a good chance that if you report that you're behind schedule, and the company is not willing to change when they're delivering something, that overtime can come into play. Just little side note. Okay. I already kind of hit on this, but there's time for active communication, phone calls, in-person meetings, and there's a time for email and text. Generally, if you need to make decisions or you're stuck on something, it's best to use phone or in person. Don't waste your time typing out an email, waiting 2 days for someone to get back to you. Just call them. You'll get your answer much quicker. Follow up with an email with details if that's necessary. But don't, it's better not to make decisions, like detailed decisions with back and forth communication over text. Okay, yes.
I have a quick question about that. I feel like there's I know you're saying there's a time and a place for that. In some instances, having a record of what was said can be very valuable, and a phone call doesn't always provide that.
Yeah.
Even if you do need that kind of quick. Would you suggest that you would ask the person on the phone to send you that info quickly?
Yeah.
In that instance?
Yeah. I would say ask for it to be sent or follow up with an email to them and say, hey, quick summary of what we discussed for our records, or something along those lines. So you've crushed it at your job, and now you are ready to move on. It ends up happening because you don't like the job, it's not what you thought, you're advancing in your career, and you're ready to make a move. So a few quick things here. Strive to leave on good terms. Your company should want to take you back. Like, they should be super bummed that you're leaving. If they're not super bummed, they probably didn't like you that much. You're pretty happy you're leaving. Be generous with your exit. So document what you've been doing, train new hires, help them replace you, essentially. Sometimes give an extended notice. All depends on the job, all depends on the circumstance. Maybe you got a job that and they want you in 2 weeks. Give your 2 weeks, but maybe you can give a month and a half notice, and that will help your company a lot. You'll leave, you'll leave a good taste in their mouth of who you are, what you do. Also, thank you notes to especially to your boss is something not a lot of, maybe a lot of people do. I don't know that a lot of people do. I left a thank you note to at the sign shop when I left, and they had been in small business their whole lives, and they're like, we have never received one of these. And I threw a gift card in, but I would highly recommend that, just like a parting thank you for they've provided your wages, they've trained you, you've probably gained a lot from them. Even if you don't like them that much, it can still go a long ways. So there's some top tips on professionalism. It's a journey. There's a lot to learn. And any questions?
Really interesting points.